Hey girl, have you been struggling to lose weight, having a lot of brain fog, feeling really tired, having cold hands and feet? Maybe you've noticed things like some extra acne, some cystic acne happening around your mouth or along your chin line, or maybe you have really dry skin. That's actually just a short list of the many things that can go wrong if your thyroid is not working the way that it's supposed to. So what I want to share with you today are some of the key ways that your thyroid actually works and why 9 times out of 10, even if you ask your doctor to check on your thyroid, they're going to be doing an insufficient job and probably missing something that could actually be wrong. So let's back it up. Let's actually just talk about how thyroid hormone works, how it's produced, and what it does in your body. So thyroid hormone is critical to our function. So we actually have receptors for thyroid hormone on just about every cell of our body. And this is why some people who actually experience significant thyroid problems, maybe to the point of having to have their thyroid removed, have to be on lifelong thyroid hormone support because we cannot live without it. So we really need it. Thyroid is one of the main regulators of our metabolism. So when someone, has a slower metabolism and their thyroid hormones are not functioning at a high enough level, it's called hypothyroidism. So hypo just meaning not enough. And there can be a few root causes of that, which I will get to. But when you have insufficient thyroid hormone, you're going to have a lot of those symptoms that I was just describing. So how does the body actually produce thyroid hormone? So here's what happens. So thyroid hormone is produced in your thyroid. So your thyroid is this little butterfly-shaped gland that is right here in your throat. But even though the thyroid is responsible for making the hormone, it doesn't make the decisions about what's happening. The part of your body that makes the decisions is your brain. So there's a couple of parts of your brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and they're responsible for monitoring what's going on with your hormone system and deciding what needs to be done. So the very first thing that happens is your brain tells your thyroid, go make thyroid hormone. And the way that it does this is through something called TSH, which also stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So again, that's your brain stimulating your thyroid, saying, hey, thyroid, it's time for you to make some hormone. Now, on the off chance that your doctor actually runs a thyroid test on you, chances are that is going to be the single one test that they're going to run. They're not going to look at all the other ways that your thyroid might be working or not working, or some of the other ways your body might be working or not working in response to that thyroid hormone. But that's the first step. So TSH is the baseline. That's what your doctor is going to look at. And again, that's your brain telling your thyroid, hey, go make some hormone. So here's a little analogy about how your brain works and gives this signal. So if your brain is noticing that there is too much thyroid going around, if there's too much thyroid hormone in circulation, it's going to want to talk to your thyroid really quietly because its job, remember, is to say, hey, make thyroid hormone. So it's probably going to whisper. It's going to be like, hey, thyroid, make some hormone. Because it doesn't want to talk too loud and get your thyroid all ramped up and making even more hormone when the problem was it was making too much hormone to begin with. So when that TSH number starts getting really, really low, then we know that you probably are tending to have too much or hyperthyroid symptoms. On the flip side, what's much more common is to have hypothyroid symptoms. So that is when your brain is noticing there ain't enough thyroid in circulation. We got a problem here because remember, that's your energy regulator. That's part of your metabolism. That's saying, here's our go juice, right? So if there's not enough, problem. So your brain's going to start talking louder. It's going to say, hey, thyroid, go make some hormone. And that's going to result in a higher number. So that TSH number is going to start creeping higher and higher because your body is saying really loudly to your thyroid, go make some freaking hormone, right? So those are the opposite ends of the spectrum. So too high, too low on the TSH number. Now, that is one interesting marker, but it cannot tell us physiologically what your body is doing with that information. So it's getting that signal, well, what's it doing with that information? And then once it has the information, it's doing something, is it doing the right thing, okay? So that was step one. So our next step is your thyroid actually making a hormone. So it's gonna get busy making thyroid hormone. Most of the thyroid hormone that your body makes is in the form of T4. And I'm actually gonna start writing down some of these numbers that we wanna check. So the first one that I mentioned was TSH. So that was thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. So when your thyroid actually gets that information and starts making thyroid, what it's going to be making is T4. So T4 is what your thyroid primarily makes. Now the thing about T4 is your body actually can't use it very well. So we have all of these receptors I was mentioning earlier. We have these receptors on the cells in our body that are ready to receive thyroid hormone. But they can only receive it when it's just the right shape. So I've talked before about hormones and receptors, but receptors are like the little lock, or I sometimes call it the baseball glove, that captures that hormone. And it has to be just the right shape to fit in there, just like a key has to be just the right shape to fit into a lock. And T4 is not just the right shape to fit into the thyroid lock. So it has to be converted in your body into the active form of thyroid, which is called T3. So your thyroid does make a little bit of T3, but not very much. Mostly it's making T4. But T3 is the active form. So T3 equals active hormone. That's what your body can actually use. And that's what's going to help your body. So let's say you're making plenty of T4, but at the same time, it's not getting changed over into T3. You're still going to have symptoms of hypothyroidism. Now that conversion, that changeover from T4 into T3 happens mostly in your liver and in your gut, in your GI tract. It can happen in other parts of the cells, but the majority, or other parts of the body, I should say, in other cells, but the majority of that conversion is happening in your liver and in your gut. So if something isn't right with your liver or your gut, you're going to have problems making that conversion. And even if TSH looks fine, or even if T4 looks fine, you're not going to have enough T3, which is that active form, that little lock to fit into the key, and you're still going to have those symptoms of low thyroid. Now here's the other important piece. So T4 and T3 actually get ferried around the body via these proteins. So these proteins are like the little taxis that carry the hormone around your body. And it's necessary, it's important, we need T4 and T3 to be carried around the body, but at the same time, when it's attached to a protein, same thing, wrong shape, won't fit into that receptor. So what we really need is to see how much of it is free. So the free is not bound to a hormone and is actually able to be used by your body. So the next numbers we want to look at are free T3 and free T4, because if we don't know what the free numbers are, we don't really know what's available for use. So your total number might look fine, but you might not really have that available to be used. So those are some of the very basic ones. So let's look at a couple of even more nuanced measures that we might want to look at when we're talking about thyroid function. So the next one is reverse T3. So that has a little R next to it, reverse T3. So you can think about, I was just saying that T3 is like, that's part of the energy function for your body. That's the metabolism, right? That's what kicks it into gear. Reverse T3, you can think of kind of like the brakes. So when your body is trying to keep everything in balance, if it thinks there's too much T3, it might start to convert over to this reverse T3, which is just essentially putting the brakes on your energy metabolism, your thyroid metabolism. So if that reverse T3 number is really, really high, we can see that again, your body might be really putting the brakes on the thyroid and the ability of the T3 to impact your body. So those are all kind of baseline and even slightly more nuanced tests that you can look at. The other thing we want to check for are antibodies. So what are antibodies? So there's antibodies. So antibodies are when your body creates something as an immune response, and that's something that's actually supposed to kill something in your body, right? So let's say you got a nasty case of the flu, and your body made antibodies to the flu virus. What that would mean was now that's what your body is using to go kill the flu, right? But when we get antibodies to something that's in our own bodies, those are autoantibodies. So we're having an autoimmune response. There are a couple of autoimmune responses we can have or conditions related to the thyroid. So Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune condition that typically ends up with hypothyroid, so you have not enough thyroid hormone in circulation. Graves' disease is the opposite. It's an autoimmune condition that results in hyperthyroid, too much thyroid. So it's actually estimated that up to 90% of hypothyroidism is related to an autoimmune response. So if you're not looking at your antibodies at the same time that you're looking at these other thyroid numbers, you're going to be missing a huge part of the picture. At the same time, I need to add the caveat that even in the absence of antibodies, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're all clear and are not having an autoimmune response. Really, the only way to officially diagnose that is to do a biopsy of your thyroid. Now, that's a really extreme level, and if you don't have other symptoms or family history that would indicate that, I'm not going to recommend that you go through that invasive process. But you might be requesting an ultrasound of your thyroid where they can actually look at the structure of your thyroid in addition to looking at these chemical function numbers. So those are some really key numbers that your doctor really should be looking at. But the great thing is you can actually request those numbers yourself. So there are lots of ways that you can do, going online and getting your own testing done, your own lab work. You don't have to wait for your doctor if they're not willing to run those numbers. If they are willing, you really should be looking at a complete thyroid panel and looking at all of those numbers. So a couple of other numbers that you might want to consider besides those that I just talked about, and these are kind of, I'll say, the gold star numbers. These are the ones that are a little bit different than most would look at. So one of them that you might want to be looking at is sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG. So sex hormone binding globulin is something that if that marker is going up, it could be in response to estrogen, to insulin, or to thyroid hormone. So if that number is really low, it might mean that you have low estrogen, high insulin, which is a risk factor for prediabetes or potentially diabetes, or low thyroid hormone. Now, the other measures of thyroid hormone are actually more effective in looking at actual thyroid function. However, there's a strong correlation between estrogen and thyroid hormone. And if there's a possibility, and I'll talk more about estrogen in another video, but if there's a possibility that your thyroid symptoms are actually a downstream effect of excess estrogen, then looking at this sex hormone binding globulin could be another effective way for you to look at your thyroid hormone. The other number that might be helpful for you in assessing thyroid function is thyroid binding globulin. So just like I was saying earlier, if you have not enough thyroid in circulation, so even if your free number looks really great, if you don't have enough T3 that is available for use because it's bound up to a protein, for example, bound up to thyroid binding globulin, then even if you have a sufficient number there, you might not have enough thyroid that can be used by your body and your cells. So I'm going to call those like your extra credit tests. They might help you. They might help to tease out if something else is going on. But really, those other tests that I just mentioned are a really comprehensive look at what's going to be happening in your thyroid overall. So that's how thyroid signaling works. And those are the tests that you need. So I want to mention one more thing here, and that is why even if your lab ranges are quote unquote normal, you might still feel like crap. So if you even got your doctor to run all of those tests, if they're not really well versed in thyroid function, they might just be looking down that test result and looking to see if anything has an H or an L next to it. So an H just means that it's high, and L means that it's low. And the lab ranges, unfortunately, are like this. They are so wide. They do not really tell you anything about optimal function. And one of the crazy things is that thyroid testing originally was done only for people who had suspected dysfunction. And our averages for thyroid function came from those people who were seeking treatment for dysfunction. So they're really not normal. The other thing is many labs use population averages when they are determining thyroid numbers. Population averages just means that they are looking at their specific population and looking at the average. Now there's some huge problems with that. So problem number one is, hello, people are getting less healthy. I really wish that were not the case, but if you look at any measures of any chronic disease, we are getting sicker as a country. And so just looking at population averages isn't really going to tell you anything about true health. The other thing is, you can't tell me that the population, I'm here in Denver, that our Denver people who go to Quest are going to have different normals than maybe somebody who lives in New York and is going to LabCorp. That just doesn't make sense. Our bodies are bodies. They are all supposed to be working in this way. So when I am looking with my clients at thyroid numbers, I am also looking at what I call functional ranges. So functional ranges are, how would your body be functioning optimally if it was working the very best that it could? So not just based on like the average of every Joe Schmo on the street, but actual optimal levels of how things should work when they are working the way that they're supposed to. So if your doctor is also just looking for the H's and the L's on this blood work, they're probably missing a critical piece of the picture, and you really need to be talking to somebody who understands functional ranges for these thyroid hormones. So I hope that has been helpful for you. I'm going to put the list of these thyroid tests that you want to request right down in the description here. So you can ask for the testing that you need. And again, you want to be working with somebody who actually understands these tests and understands a way to look at them and look through all of the different ways that your body is functioning, not just single numbers and not just lab ranges. Hope this video has been helpful, and I will talk to you more next time.